Happy New Year and welcome to the January 9th meeting of the Penfield Planning Board. We have an exciting agenda for you tonight, but first we will start off by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody please rise. Okay, we have one item on the agenda tonight. It is a sketch plan, and we will start off with Katie reading the application. We will hear the applicant present their proposed project. The board will ask questions. After that, we'll open it up to the members of the audience in attendance. Following that, when everybody's asked all the questions that they want to ask, we'll reconvene in the back of the auditorium to finish up our business for the evening. So, with that said, Katie, would you please read our application?
Application number 1, Walt Baker, DSB Engineers and Architects, PC, 2394 Ridgeway Avenue, number 201, Rochester, New York, 14626, on behalf of Daniel E. Edwards of the Vision Group, requests an informal discussion with the board regarding the construction of a 5,000 square foot off-road test track for vehicle demonstrations located at 770 Panorama Trail South on 3.78 acres. The property is now or formerly owned by Vision 2 LLC and is zoned general business. Application number 13P-0034, SBL number 138.08-1-47.
Good evening. I'm Walt Baker with DSB Engineers and Architects. With me tonight, as Katie mentioned, is Dan Edwards from the Peeler Vision Group, Michael Peeler from Peeler Vision Group, and George Delaney from Jaguar Land Rover Range Rover Corporation. So if you have any specific questions for them, they'd be more than happy to address what questions you may have. As Katie mentioned, the map that I submitted with the cover letter and the application is the same map I posted on the board here. And she stated we're at 770 Panorama Trail. And the existing building, which was the Vision Peeler Group, purchased it last summer and are proposing to utilize it for the Jaguar Land Rover Range Rover dealership. Presently, their facility is up in Webster on Ridge Road, and they're going to relocate to Penfield. We did go in front of the zoning board to get the conditional use changed from the Hastings Buick site that had the facility previously. It was formerly the Saturn building. Everybody recalls the Saturn building. So it's the front building along Panorama Trail. The rear building is the Buick dealership. Tonight, what we're requesting is the review for an off-road vehicle demonstration track. And what that is it's in connection with Land Rover, Range Rover vehicles. Everybody's familiar that the history of Land Rover, Range Rover has been utilized throughout the world and for I don't know how many years. But with that, they're proposing, and then what they do on their facilities is to provide what they call a demonstration track. And that's what we illustrated here. It's in this area on the side of the existing pavement, and I also showed a couple details on the plan, and in your application there's a few additional details which show the height of it, which is approximately 6 feet. And what we're proposing in this case is they have basically 2 mounds or hills that a representative that's trained by Land Rover Corporation on how to drive the vehicle over the test track, over the demonstration track, so they can have a prospective buyer understand the capabilities and the suspension of the vehicles. They've got all, electronic suspension, electronic downslope control sensors and all that. So when you drive the vehicle on an off-road situation on a side slope or just up a grade and down a grade, the prospective buyer can understand how the vehicle actually responds. So that's what we'd like to do, is to add that to this site. And we did get comments from the staff, and the key thing is that the site itself is 3.7 acres, and a substantial portion of it is along Arundecoit Creek. In this blue shaded area, in the orange area, is actually where the creek theoretically would flood periodically, and I'm pretty, yeah, everybody's aware, but the extent of it varies during the storm event, so. And the Army Corps has made improvements in this area over the years, but the theoretical flood staging area is just about all the way up to our asphalt area that's existing pavement is today. And we were trying to illustrate it in this area, which would, like Katie mentioned, would require filling to bring it up to grade so we can build a track on top of that. So with that, we would also need Army Corps' permission in order to do anything in the floodplain besides the EPOD permit that's with the town. So we did have a couple conversations prior to the meeting this evening, and we were considering making the track smaller based on the comments we got, knowing the floodplain and how long a process that would be to try to get that approved. So we're thinking of possibly relocating it. We don't have much room on site, like I mentioned. It's pretty much all parking. We've got the landscaping in this area, landscaping over here, and then there's a strip along the side. And right in the corner, up near Panorama Trail, on the radius of the parking, we're thinking of possibly scaling down the size of the test track so we could fit it in that area there and take it completely out of the floodplain and relocate it to that location. So I guess as far as review with the board, knowing the comments that we received from the staff, would that be a consideration for us to relocate it into this area right here? And actually, like I mentioned, just scale it down. If we put it here, we will not need all these extra contours because the area that we show it now actually drops off. So we'd have to fill that area up first and then build a test track on top of it. So that's where the displacement of the floodplain comes in. And if we move it over in this location, it'll be outside the floodplain area. And it's virtually a flat area, so we just have to build a track up.
Setback or?
Yes, it would be, well, the setback, how does that apply to?
Good question. We'd have to.
I know, because it's not a building.
Right.
You know, basically it's subgrade that's compacted, and then it's field stone set in concrete to create the surface. But it would be basically
Site distance?
the orange line would be right up against the property line.
Site distance entering and exiting the site?
The only entrance we have on the site is here, and as you can see, Panorama Trail is actually on a slight curve, and it's 2 lanes southbound, 2 lanes northbound. So as far as site distance, anybody leaving the site over in this location would not have an effect on anybody trying to pull out into traffic as far as blocking their view. So we just discussed that prior to the meeting. We were standing out in the hallway. I explained the comments that we did receive and the concerns that we'd have trying to get it approved with the Army Corps.
Right, right.
And there isn't any other place that we could, if we did build it in this location, obviously we'd have to compensate by providing that volume outside of the floodplain, the existing floodplain, creating another floodplain area, and we don't have that space.
Board, anybody have, you're good?
I got one question.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, well, do you have a similar off-test track out in Webster presently?
No. The existing facility in Webster doesn't have a test track.
So now,
No.
what happens? People come and take a test drive for a Land Rover, and the guy takes people out there and runs up these hills and down just to show how the vehicle handles?
Well, yeah, it's not really running it. You wouldn't even be doing, basically you're climbing up the grade and down again, so it's almost like pulling your car into a garage, that type of speed. You'd be just barely moving along, so you get the sense of how the vehicle and the suspension responds to the vehicle tipping on an angle versus going up a straight incline and down the incline. So it's really not, it's not like you'd see some monster truck type thing where they're
Right.
speeding through. It's just a matter of maneuvering over the obstacle.
Now, had you applied for this test track in Webster?
We did 3 years ago, I believe it was. No, about 3 years ago.
But it wasn't, what happened with that?
The planning board in Webster didn't approve it.
They did not approve it?
No.
Was there a reason why?
The location was adjacent to the rear of the property, and the rear of the property was a zoning line change between residential boundary to the rear, and in that particular instance,
More of a buffer thing?
it was a buffer. It was basically to the rear of the property, and it was adjacent to residential zoning, existing houses.
How is it, I mean, I can see, 22-year-old young men having a couple drinks and deciding that at 2 in the morning they want to try out the test track. What are experiences with other facilities like this in other locations? How do you keep it secure? How do you, what is the process for that? And as I would imagine, it'd be a pretty hefty liability insurance.
For the owner, correct.
Yeah.
Basically the attractive nuisance.
Yeah,
What they've done, and like I mentioned, George Delaney's from the corporate office, and typically what they've done at other facilities throughout the country is park a vehicle at the end of the day before they close up the dealership. They park a vehicle at either end. He says some of them actually have a gate with a chain it off, keeping people from actually getting on it. So the vehicle's probably the safest way. Put a vehicle right there so they can't even get on the track. And on either side of the track, it's a split rail fence, but you're going up the grade, you cannot go up the sides because the sides are
vertical.
close to vertical. They're pretty steep.
Okay.
How many of these facilities do you have in New York?
George,
How many?
how many facilities in New York that have the test
Test
track?
tracks.
Have the test track? How many sites?
Albany just built one,
Albany,
and, let's see,
Where in Albany is that?
it's on.
Like Clifton Park or someplace, or?
No, Colony.
Colony?
And they have one in Glen Cove, Glenhead, Long Island. Huntington, Long Island. Trying to think offhand where the others are. There's a couple
There's
of.
not very many of them, doesn't sound like.
Nationally, we have about 70 or 80 of them, yeah.
How often are they used?
Some retailers use them as a closing tool to, when they think someone is ready to consider buying a Land Rover or a Range Rover. They make it a practice of taking it.
George,
taking it-
do you mind
Sure.
stepping up to the podium and maybe using the handheld? I just got word from the boss downstairs that no one at home can hear you.
Okay,
So if you could introduce yourself maybe.
George
and-
Delaney, franchise manager, Jaguar Land Rover North America.
Okay.
We have about 70 or 80 of these tracks. We've had them since, I think the earliest one went in 1995. So we've had them for quite a long time. Most retailers use them as a closing tool, a sales closing tool. When a customer seems to be ready to consider buying a car, then the sales advisor takes them over this course. After they do an on-road demonstration, they take them over the off-road demonstration and show them what the vehicle can do off-road. Some retailers, don't use them too much. most retailers who have Land Rover centers have them. I'd say about 70% of the retailers have them. Yep.
Any other questions from the board?
This facility is going to take care of Syracuse.
Anyone in the audience care to comment on this application? No? Okay.
Well, we'd like the board to consider moving it out of the floodplain and placing it in the corner.
Right. Okay.
That would address, like I said,
A lot of the
number of the questions.
floodplain concerns, for sure.
Correct. Yeah. We would appreciate it.
All right, what we'll do at this point, you'll get a letter with our opinion. There's no real decision. Since it's a sketch plan, it's kind of an unofficial, informal review of the idea. But you'll get a letter from the planning board giving basically what the board feels about the potential project. Okay?
Very good.
Again, Happy New Year, and with that, if nobody else has any comments, we will call this sketch plan closed. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.